All right, so I'm here with the living legend, Iggor Cavalera from the band Sepultura. How you doing today, Iggor?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm in Salt Lake City, getting ready for the show tonight. Yeah,
So how's the
in the
tour
middle
been
of the
going?
tour.
How's the tour been going, playing these two classic albums?
It's been amazing. I mean, we did had some amazing shows, of course. Doing the Metal Fest, in Maryland, it was great, and but also a lot of amazing headlining shows. So we're looking forward. We're kind of like midway through the tour, so it's been really cool.
All right, so how do you like playing live? Is it something that you really enjoy doing? How do you like being on tour and playing live?
I really enjoy playing live. Of course, I'm not as big on traveling as most people, but actually playing the shows, it's pretty amazing. Like it's something that during the whole pandemic, the whole thing with lockdowns and things like that, it was very difficult not being able to perform. But it feels really good to be back on the road and we don't no restrictions and nothing like that.
So why did you start playing the drums? What inspired you to play the drums?
I started very, very young, man. I was like 5 or 6 when I picked the drums. I didn't even think about playing drums for a band. I just liked the instrument by itself. And then many years later, the whole band thing came more as an idea with me and my brother. But at first, I just liked the drums as an individual thing. I like to play it by myself and enjoy the energy of it, and of course, like a lot of Brazilian rhythms and things like that influenced me to start to pick up drums. And then later, as I got into rock and things like that, it evolved more and more into more like a band kind of thing.
And what rock or metal drummers influenced you when you were young?
I mean, a lot of amazing drummers, of course, Bill Ward from Black Sabbath, still one of my biggest influences. And yeah, like him, Stuart Copeland from Police. And then later on, of course, people like Filthy Animal from Motorhead, and more like energetic drummers doing a lot of fast stuff like Dave Lombardo. All those guys pretty much built my ideal concept of a drums. Like it's something that it's not as technical. It's more of an energy and it has more soul to it than just being super technical. That's how I like the drums. I think the technical part is important, but it's not the main thing. I like certain drummers that they're not as technical, but they're very creative with what they do. And for me, that's very important.
And what song did you use to like practice when you were young? What was like a song that you used to get going, to warm up or to learn the drums?
I used to put records in my house and just have drumsticks and play on like the sofa and things like that and try to emulate, like I said, stuff like Sabbath and later, Motorhead and more of the punk stuff. But even before I had a chance to sit on a real drum set, I was jamming, to a lot of cool stuff like that, like the early Sabbath stuff. It's very, very influential and also very, very fun to just pay attention to the drum parts.
Cool. So I want to talk a little bit about, of course, the Beneath the Remains album. Got the album right here. Wanted to get into it. So the album, of course, just talk about a little bit. How was it recording it in Rio? How was that process recording it? Because you guys, of course, used to record in Belo Horizonte. So how was recording in Rio for this album?
It was a big step because it was a very professional like studio, where the previous albums we had to struggle a bit with not having people that knew exactly the kind of music that we wanted. And some producers and stuff, they were very unaware of the distortion and how fast certain things were. So to be in Rio and playing with in a proper studio, and then of course with an amazing engineer and producer, which was Scott Burns, we could finally get the sounds that we wanted, you know.
And working with Scott Burns, how you know, of course, he's a metal legend after all these years. How did he change the band? Was he just a great guy to work with?
Yeah, very chill, very mellow, but also helped a lot on developing ideas and things like that. I think he helped Max a lot with the lyric side of things, on how to put his vocals on certain parts and things like that. And of course, like talking about sound, he really knew how to capture the stuff that we were looking for. So it was a lot of fun doing it because of that, because we didn't spend much time trying to get those sounds. We spent a lot more time being creative. So that's very, very important with a producer.
And do you think the production for this album was the best for Sepultura after this album? You think it was like the best at that point?
Yeah, definitely. At that point, it was something that we really were craving for, something like this. Of course, like especially albums like Morbid Visions and Bestial Devastation, for us, they really didn't represent how the band was performing live. It has its charm to it, but if I really think about it, it's not a real representation. We sounded very different that live than in the studio for those two records. So it was a bit of a letdown at the time. So to have a chance to do it with Scott and to do it, you know, like with a bit more time to elaborate our ideas, it was very special.
How was the song Inner? I want to talk about a few of the songs. I'm just going to go over some of the songs. How was Inner Self written? That drum part. How was it written?
Inner Self is quite it's a lot of ideas, you know, like it's a song that changes the pace almost every few bars. We kept changing, you know, it goes from like double bass in the beginning to something more of like a straightforward beat, and then it goes into fast like D beat stuff. So it has a lot of different elements. So that's, I think, the cool thing about a song like Inner Self. It has a lot of dynamics within the drums, you know, like, and then when we're writing, that was the idea. It was to try to not do one thing from beginning to the end, but to try to go all over the place, you know.
And what about A Stronger Than Hate? That's a very complex song as well. How was the collaboration with, of course, you had John Tardy and Kelly Schaefer doing background vocals. How did that come about? How did that collaboration happen?
Well, actually, I wasn't there because Max went to do some final touches on Beneath the Remains in Florida with Scott. And unfortunately, at the time, we didn't have money to afford all of us to go. So only Max was there, and he invited the guys to come and help with the vocals. But then again, you know, speaking of Stronger Than Hate, it's such a strong song as far as like not only drums but the riffs and the vocals. It's one of my favorites to play live.
And what about the song Lobotomy? I always felt that's a complicated song too, I think, on the drums. What was that?
Which one? Lobotomy?
Lobotomy, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Lobotomy, it's something that we always like. At that time, we were enjoying a lot of like different ideas and different bands who were pushing the limits. So Lobotomy, it really translates that style of pushing limits of ourselves and kind of like, in a way, like almost like challenging each other to go further with our playing. So that song translates a lot of those, you know, feelings.
And did this album have a concept to it, or was it just kind of different ideas? Were you guys looking for a concept with this album?
No, it was no concept. It was just a bunch of different topics, of different ideas that at the end they form what it was Beneath the Remains, and later also Arise. Those two albums, they don't have like a main topic or like one thing that goes through the whole record. It's pretty much free.
And how did the success of the band change after Beneath the Remains?
It was great because, of course, like it was the first time we got to play outside of South America. So for us, that was a big deal, you know, to go on tour, to open for bands that we like Sodom and things like that. And then later start picking up on festivals and playing with even bigger bands and bigger names. So it definitely had a huge impact, you know, on our way of writing itself, you know. Also, you know, that influenced a lot us after we did those tours with Beneath the Remains. So by the time we wrote Arise, we picked up a lot of those ideas to keep it, you know, something that was solid, but also it worked live as a performance, you know.
All right, now I'm going to talk a little about the album Arise. So this album, of course, was recorded in Morrisound. That's, of course, a classic metal studio. How was it like going to Morrisound?
I mean, for us, it was a dream. You know, it's like the mecca of a lot of underground music, and a lot of our favorite bands were doing stuff there. So it's really cool. But also, I think Morrisound had like a professional way of doing things, where bands would come there and they already had like a tool set up to it. So that was something that for us as Brazilians, you know, like coming out of the country and being there for the first time, it was mind blowing. But also, we really appreciate all of that, you know.
And did you use the same drum kit on Arise that you used on Beneath the Remains, or was it a different drum kit?
Totally different, because Beneath, of course, it was in Brazil, and I used whatever I had at that time. And then by the time we went to Morrisound to get Arise, I could choose a bit more of the stuff that I wanted. So it was a lot of fun also being able to go through like different snares, different cymbals, and where even on Beneath the Remains, I just had to deal with whatever I had at the time, you know.
And for Arise, the song Arise, how did you get that cymbal sound? Was that a crash cymbal, or how was that? How did you achieve that sound with Scott Burns in the studio?
I think that was China, if I'm not like that. It was a combination of a lot of heavy crashes that usually they're used as rides, and I use for crashing, and then with some China stuff that creates a bit more of a diverse cymbal sound to it.
And for the song "Desperate Cry," how was that song written? That for a lot of people, that's like maybe the top song, the anthem for the band. How was that? How did that song come about?
It was great writing it, but I also have to say it was a pain in the ass to record in the studio, because the end has a super long thing with lots of like crazy drums and rhythms. So I remember after a long day of doing a lot of takes and a lot of drums, we tried to do Desperate Cry, and I was already burned out. So I remember my first try on it, I didn't like it how it came out. And then I remember Scott came up to me and he was like, let's just go home and try this same thing tomorrow with fresh ears and not as tired, you know, because we're doing like 5-6 songs a day on the drums. So next day I came in and did it on a few takes and finished. But I remember going to bed that night and being really worried if the song wouldn't be as good as I wanted, you know.
Was that the hardest song to record then for the band, you think?
I think it was, but also it has a lot to do with being all day recording different stuff, and then it was a bad choice to leave that song for the end of the day, you know.
Yeah. All right. So what about the song Altered State? The drum intro. Can you talk a little bit about that for the song Altered State?
I think that song, you know, it has some of the early experimenting with tribal beats and things like that. So I think that was like our first encounter on trying to incorporate some Brazilian rhythms and some tribal stuff. And then I remember even the intro, there was a guy at Morris Sound that he did a lot of like sound for movies and things like that. So we asked him to do an intro that had a bit of like that jungle vibe thing. And then from that, we create something a bit more tribal and still super heavy. But that would be the early experiments of drumming for me with Sepultura.
And how were the drums recorded on Under Siege? How did you get that drum sound on Under Siege?
The same, actually. It's pretty much the same way as the other tracks. It's maybe the way I play it, it's different. So it has a little more of a dynamic to it that stands out. It's different, but it was all pretty much the same drums. I didn't change the drum set from one song to the other, you know.
How many time signature changes are in Under Siege? That has a lot of time signature changes, right? For Under Siege.
I never counted, man, but there is quite a few, you know.
Yeah.
And that was again, it was something that we're really into at the time, trying to be as dynamic as possible. Nowadays, I'm not such a big fan of those, you know, changes.
And
at that time, I was really enjoying.
Yeah, and for the song Meaningless Movements, that song I think is a song that it influenced a lot of, I think, metal drummers that came after. Can you talk a little about that song, Meaningless Movements?
Yeah, I mean, it has, like, of course, like a lot of different roles and different ideas that I was trying to incorporate to make it, again, something that it stand out from the rest. And again, I think it was my early stage of trying to find my signature drum style. You know, like I believe between Beneath the Remains and Arise, it's where I started to get more and more comfortable with my own way of doing things and not trying to emulate another drummers, you know.
How was it like playing in Rock in Rio in '91?
Yeah, it's crazy because I was talking about this yesterday with a friend, and it was like a huge thing in Brazil. But me and my brother, we couldn't go. We were super young, and our mom didn't let. Then years later, we got invited to play the second time of Rock in Rio, and that was amazing. That was something that it's, you know, to this day, it's one of my favorite concerts.
How did the touring change for the band after Arise? Like when you guys came to the States?
You mean after Arise or
After the album? You guys, of course, toured with you know, Sacred Reich. How were those tours after the album?
I think that we the most Arise. You know, we did probably almost like 150 gigs like in one year, and tours, and then I remember the label was trying to get us to write Chaos AD, and every time we tried to stop to write, another tour would show up, and we just wouldn't say no. So it was like we started out with you know, stuff like we were playing with Obituary and Sadas, and then by the end of the tour, we had tours like with Ministry and Helmet. So it was very diverse, very cool.
How was it like opening for Ozzy in his supposed farewell show here in Costa Mesa? How was that show in '92?
That was a trip, man, because not only it was Ozzy, you know, doing that his thing, but also he had the other guys from Black Sabbath, you know, like participate on the show, and they did a jam. So for us to be part of that whole thing, it was like a dream again. You know, like I was watching my favorite drummer, Bill Ward, you know, like from stage, and had a chance to chat with him for a little bit. So it was definitely a highlight, you know, like, and yeah, and little that we know that to this day, Ozzy's still doing his farewell things.
Yeah, 30 years
He
later,
has,
right?
he hasn't stopped that.
All right. I want to ask you a little bit about the song Territory. Of course, this is off Chaos AD, but that's a classic metal opening that I think influenced bands such as like Slipknot and Korn. Talk a little about that song Territory.
That intro with the drums was actually an accident. I was trying out to do some drum rolls, and I remember by doing that, I was kind of like doing almost like a loop of a roll, and then by doing that, we thought it would be cool to start the song with that crazy drum roll that kept going, and then start adding guitars and building from the drums. So it was a different concept. It was something that it was usually a lot of times you have a riff and then the drums try to do something on top of the riff. And then in this time, it was the other way around where the drums was the main riff and then everyone else was trying to follow that.
How was filming the music video for Territory? That's the first music video I saw, kind of the song that got me into the band. How was filming that music video for Territory?
It was pretty crazy because of course, like we had no permission to film in all those places. So to be in Palestine and Israel and filming, it was very hardcore to the point that the guy who filmed the video, he had to leave like 1 or 2 days before us with all the film. So by the time we would leave the country, they wouldn't confiscate all the footage.
Wow. Any plans for Chaos AD for the 30 years next year?
I mean, we're always open. Like me and Max, we talk about this on how can we make all those things very special. So hopefully we'll come up with something for that. But it's definitely something that could happen. It's not planned yet.
And the song Orgasmatron from Arise, forgot to ask you, why was that song not included on the USA version when it was released?
I don't know, man. I think it's a better question for the label because we did that as a B-side, and then the label decided where and how they would add that song. For us it was cool. We're of course huge Motorhead fans, and that became like huge. Like that song, like especially like we won like an MTV award in Brazil for that song. So it became something very, very special. But that question, I think it's more up to the label. We didn't really choose where on how certain songs would feature on the record, especially the B-sides. It was more like a business thing,
And what happened in 2006? Why did you decide to leave the band?
I was just tired, man. Like I wanted to reconnect with my brother. So I decided just, not doing anything with related with metal. I was doing a lot of like experimental stuff in Brazil, and yeah, that was my ending with that.
And you probably get this question all the time, but are you okay if the band never reunites, or do you have any hope that, of course the fans would want it to come back, but I mean, are you okay if it never happens?
I have to be honest with you, man. That the reunion, in my opinion, it's me and my brother. Like that's the person that I want to be united with. So it's for me. That's the if the other stuff it doesn't happen, I can't really be too bummed about it. Of course it'll be amazing, but the real reunion for me is just me and my brother being together. That's what makes me happy.
Any advice for young drummers out there?
Yeah, I mean, my main advice is something that I always still push it, which is try to be as original as possible, and then of course the technical part comes with time, comes with playing a lot. And if you worry too much about being technical, in the first place, you might miss all those cool ideas and all those raw energy things that might come up, you know. So my main device really is for the upcoming and people starting to drum, picking up the sticks, is to, you know, pay attention more to the heart and less to the brain, you know.
So next Saturday, you'll be playing here in LA, going to be there at the show. Are you excited for that show to come to LA, play at the Velasco Theater?
I'm so excited, man. I mean, last time we were in LA, it was amazing. We always have a special connection with LA, of course, because of all our Latino brothers, you know, that always represent, you know, in Los Angeles, but also in general, everyone that comes to our gigs since the beginning. It's quite exciting. So we can't wait, man.
And a question here about soccer. Palmeiras. What? Of course, you guys have been winning Copa Libertadores back-to-back years. What are your thoughts on the team? You guys going to win a third one?
I hope, man, because they're doing great. You know, like I follow a lot of football still, and you know they're killing it. They have a really strong coach. Like that, I mean, I think in South America at this moment they are the best team. Of course, things can happen. You know, they can lose a game and lose the championship, but as far as a team is concerned, they're the best, man. You know, at this moment, no one can front them. You know.
Do you see Brazil winning the World Cup this year?
No, I don't know, man. I have to say I don't really like a lot of the players who play for Brazil at this moment, especially like people like Neymar. I'm not a fan of his style, of his attitude, you know. So I don't really care if Brazil wins or lose with that kind of a team. I think once we change those players and change the attitude, I will be more excited about Brazil.
All right, last question here. Any new bands we should check out for the listeners? Any new bands you want to throw out there that we should check out?
Oh man, there's a lot of good stuff, man. I have to say, not only metal, but in music in general, there's always a lot of killer stuff. So I don't know, like there's a band playing with us at this moment, which is Max's son, and they're pretty cool, called Healing Magic. So, but there's a lot of cool stuff. I think people who think there's not good music at the moment, they're just lazy. They're just not searching enough, you know.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Iggor, for coming on this interview. We're going to, of course, put this on the radio in a few days. But I want to thank you for once again. Thanks for being on the interview, Iggor.
Thank you, brother. I'll see you at the gig.
Yeah, see you there. Thanks a lot.